Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, a string of acid attacks in Iran left at least 4 women disfigured. So what's behind these incidents? We have an online community today. We have an online community from Iran who are actually tweeting us. Mika Bilal, digital producer of the stream. What are they saying?
Right. Well, one of the things that I'm seeing is this sense of fear after these attacks, and really it's palpable, even online. And so some of the things that are circulating are pictures like this. This is an editorial cartoon of a syringe filled with acid, and it's aiming at a target on a woman's forehead. And this is put out by the civil society organization Tavana. So this is just one example. We'll delve into what's behind that fear in today's show. We want to do it with your help, though. So tweet us with the hashtag AJStream.
Joining us in this conversation, we have Nagar Mortazavi. She's an Iranian journalist and also a social media analyst. Nagar, great to have you back here.
Thanks for having me.
You have a laptop in front of you. We're going to make you work. Are you ready?
Definitely.
All right, stand by for that.
Thanks.
Talk to you more in just a moment.
Sure.
I'm Gisu Nia. I'm the Deputy Director of the International Campaign for Human Rights in Iran, and I'm in the stream.
In October, a series of acid attacks against Iranian women in the city of Isfahan shocked many, as these kinds of incidents are unusual. One woman died and a number of others were disfigured after having acid thrown on them. Outraged by the attacks, many Iranians took to the streets of Isfahan and the capital Tehran in rare protest to demand justice for the victims. Now, the incidents have also generated a lot of reactions on Iranian social media about the motivations behind the attacks and how the government has responded. Today, we want to tap into those conversations, and to help us do that, we're also joined by Suzanne Tamasibi. She's co-founder of the International Civil Society Action Network, and that's an NGO working to support women's civil society in conflict-affected countries. Nazreen Afzali is a researcher on women's issues and a former journalist. And Sadegh Zivakalam is Professor of Political Science at the University of Tehran. So it's good to have you all here on board, guests. Let me start with Sadegh. Isfahan in Iran, what kind of a place is it? Can you give us a little description? Take us there.
Yeah.
Take us to Isfahan. Yeah. What is it like?
Yeah. Okay. Well, as Isfahan is the principal historic city in Iran, it has been the capital city under various dynasties during the past 1,000 years, under Safavid, under Mongol and other tribes and dynasties.
All right.
It's very famous throughout the world for its mosque, for its palaces, and for its boulevard, and also for its historic bridges on Zayan Rud, the main river in Isfahan. I must also say that Isfahan is a very powerful and strong religious community, religious city. Isfahan has had the highest number of martyrs during the war with the 8-year war with Iraq.
All right. So, Suzanne, Sadegh gave us an idea of what Isfahan is like, but is it somewhere where women would be attacked for how they were dressed, perhaps? I just want to try to get an idea of why it happened in this particular place.
Well, Isfahan is a very conservative city. It's not, it tends to be a more conservative city than, say, Tehran, for example, but it's not a place where women would get attacked. In fact, I would say that really Iran is not a place where women would get attacked in this way, in this sort of a systematic and serial manner where several women get attacked with acid. And I think that that's why we had such a huge and strong reaction from the public when the news broke, that they were actually very upset, and they organized a protest in Isfahan to object to what's happening, to show their support for women, and to tell women who were very fearful to leave their house after the news of the attacks broke, that they're there standing with them and they're going to condemn all sorts of violence. So I don't think that this is a place where it's common for women to get attacked in this way.
Well, Femi, after these attacks broke and news of the attacks broke, the reaction that we saw from people online looked a little something like this. This is a tweet we got from Nima, who says, reports suggest that victims of attacks were bad hijab, as they did not have proper Islamic hijab when they were attacked. So Nagar, of course, he's referring to the head covering that's mandatory in Iran, but he's tweeting us from Iran, and I know that you're also tapped in with people who are sending you messages as well. What were they saying about their thoughts on why these attacks happened?
So Isfahan is the center of tourism, as it was mentioned, but what's special to Isfahan is also there's this very conservative Friday prayer imam, which would be a very important religious figure using a very important tribune. That's something that people have been discussing that would sort of give a lead to these vice groups or the so-called independent groups who seem to be supported from certain positions of power and also get these kind of leads. Let me read you this anonymous message that I got, that a woman in Iran said, "We hear at Friday prayers that it's been said enforcing hijab can no longer be done by words and needs to go beyond that." Even one of the imams had mentioned that blood might need to be spilled for the hijab to be enforced. So when this is constantly repeated, she said, at mosques and other tribunes, it gives a lead to the radical groups to do things like that.
Sorry, go ahead, Malika.
Well, I'm just wondering, when you hear that, then what do women, like Nasreen, what do women think when they hear that this is coming out of the mosques?
Yes, actually, the thing that I want to emphasize is that this attack is not targeted the special women like bad hijab. I mean that these women were not targeted for a long time by this attacker, and they are just some women, young women, that should be kind of sign and signal to other women to preserve their hijab, and not just also their hijab, but to be present in public sphere and to go beyond the red lines that the Islamic Republic has designed and described for women, like driving, like being employed, being economically independent. So this is not individual in the sense that these women were targeted, but we can see that many other women were threatened by text message or by different other threatening. So and women got that message, and that was very wise and clever of Iranian women and Iranian people in general, that they got the message, and that's why they came to the street and shout against this extremism.
Stop a second, because I'm just trying to understand what you're saying here. What was the message that was being sent by motorbikers throwing acid at random women, if it happened to be random women? What is the message that was being sent there, as far as you're concerned?
Yes, exactly. It was random women,
yeah,
and young women, and it means that you women always are threatened by fundamentalists and by extremists, and you should be always consider about your security, and it was another instrument,
right,
for having the society in general and the family in particular to control women more than before.
Okay, all right, got that. Sadiq, but people didn't just take this. They went out in the streets in Isfahan. They also went out in the streets in Tehran. It's quite difficult to demonstrate in Iran. What did you make of these demonstrations?
Well, the point is that I think these acid attacks, the term that have become used in Iran, it happened as far as the government was concerned. It happened at a very embarrassing moment for the Islamic government, because in exactly at the same time, a very controversial bill was going through Iranian parliament, which actually empowered the publics to advise, to admonish others for their hijab, for their behavior. In other words, if this bill gets through the Iranian parliament, then it empowers Sadiq Ziba Kalam, for example, or anyone else to tell to another woman, or another man for that matter, in everywhere in Iran, that please, madam, what is that hijab that you are wearing? It is not proper.
Right.
You must wear proper hijab. Now, the civil rights activists, particularly women and intellectual writers, they were very unhappy about this bill because, as I said, this bill literally empowers every individual on a street in everywhere.
So Sadiq, are we talking about Sadiq? Excuse me 1 second. Are we talking about every individual or every man? Is it what men can say to women, or is it every individual can say to another person, I don't think you're appropriately dressed, I don't think you're behaving in an appropriate manner?
Well, I must confess that your question caught me in surprise, because I haven't read the bill properly.
Right.
But it has been taken for granted that it is basically it is the men's duty.
Yes, of course we're talking about men here.
To caution, to
Right.
advise others. I mean, it would be very, very difficult for me to see that a woman approaching me in
Would
Iran,
tell you how to dress or how to behave.
and
All
telling
right.
me, Sadiq, you are wearing tie, and Sadiq, you're wearing a shirt with short sleeve. Could you go home and change your dress?
Okay,
Usually
everyone's laughing here. That's not going to happen in Iran right now.
Others.
All right, okay, Nigar.
Just to elaborate on what Nasreen had started, and then to make this political divide a little bit clearer, we have this message from Mehri, a mother of two in Tehran. She sent me a private message saying, look at these targets, the women. They are the typical demography that would be supporters of President Rouhani and his moderate government. They're young, they're women, they have moderate hijab, they're usually driving, so that means she's probably educated, probably has a job, is out on the street by herself in late afternoon, so it has a sign that she's independent. So they weren't specifically targeted as per se the person, but a demography,
A type of woman.
a type of woman, a type of a supporter of a certain type of governance, of a certain type of political agenda that's being promoted in Iran these days. And this is basically how I see would be a similarity to what we saw during President Khatami's reformist government, as a way for the extremists and for the fundamentalists to undermine the government and basically send a message to the people, to the supporters, and to the government that civil liberties are not going to happen. It's not going to increase, even though your president had promised you during the election. We're not going to let it happen. But these kind of messages.
I think it's so interesting that you said that, because Suzanne, and she's talking about the people that are the targets of this. I want to let you in on some of the tweets that we got to the stream. Atia talks about the fear that she feels now. She says it's very bad. I'm an Iranian girl. I'm really terrified, and I decided not to go out without my father. Another person gives a recommendation of what they can do. Muia says they have to protect themselves and be careful. Their government won't help them, so their security is in their hands. So I'd like you to talk about that sense of fear that we alluded to, and of course that Nigar talked about. One of the things that people are doing are taking matters into their own hands, wearing helmets. This is a picture that's circulating online. This is on Facebook, and this is two women wearing motorcycle helmets. Is that what people have to resort to, Suzanne?
Well, I just want to make a comment about what Nigar said. I think it would be a disservice to women to chalk this up as an attack against Rouhani's government. I mean,
No, I meant the supporters in the government.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it political in that sense. I mean, I really do see it as a political attack, but not necessarily one that's orchestrated by a particular group. But I think I see this is not a personal attack. We've had experiences of acid attacks in the past that have been personal attacks, and we have actually, especially in the last few years, but really over decades, we've seen sort of this incremental violence sort of being systematized against women. And, whether it's from laws that promote inequality.
So Suzanne has frozen just there for a moment. Suzanne, this is frozen just a moment. Suzanne, hold that thought. We'll actually just sort out that connection with you. While Suzanne, we're fixing that, I want to bring you back here to my laptop. So this is President Rouhani and also the chairman of the Parliament of Iran speaking out against these attacks. Have a listen to what he said just recently.
This is an inhumane act which is not paralleled with any rules and is the most evil thing that a person with a sick mind can do in a society.
I urge the National Security Committee to delve into the issue and report back to the Parliament. The big mistake, though, is using this gruesome social incident as a political pretext by different parties.
So, who is behind this? If the president is actually speaking out against this, Negar, who do you think is actually behind the acid attacks? Where are they coming from?
Well, we don't know yet because nobody has been arrested, but what people have been speculating online, and I don't disagree with what Suzanne is saying. What I meant was not necessarily whoever went out and voted for President Rouhani, but is this demography of people who want more civil liberties in different ways in Iran.
You made that point really clearly. So what you're seeing online are people actually saying, okay, I believe it's either this group or this group who are attacking women.
I haven't seen much of naming actual groups. Some people have been pointing out at the Basij, which is seen as a symbol of more fundamentalism and, you know, the radical groups. We don't have any specific information on what type of groups, but it's basically extremists who people think are getting the lead from religious figures, from more, politically motivated ideologists who are speaking out about bad hijab.
Malika.
Well, picking up on that, Sadiq, I'll direct this to you actually, Sadiq, because I hear that you're...
Can I just make a short intervention?
Go ahead, please do.
Can I just make a short intervention?
Go ahead.
Well, basically in Iran, there are two valid theories chasing the culprit, that who was responsible. The first theory is that it was by religious fundamentalists, vigilantes, and they wanted to warn the female that be aware of your hijab and forget about government. It is us who would confront you. That's one theory. The second theory, which has been propagated very much by the Islamic officials, is that it has been done deliberately to sabotage the bill which was going through the parliament. And because of the huge publicity that the acid throwing received, the government actually has been saying that it's been instigated by foreign agents, if you like. And they are behind it in order to discredit the Islamic regime, and particularly this bill which is going through the Iranian parliament.
Right. All right, let me just... Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne. Or Nazreen.
Suzanne or me?
Nazreen and then Suzanne.
Yes, I think that there are lots of evidence that you can be sure that this is the second theory that Dr. Ziba Kalam talked about is not correct. And the first thing is that these text messages, that during the 2008 uprising in Iran after the presidential election, lots of people get arrested just because of sending text messages, and text message was filtered by the name of Musavi, Khatami, and something like this. And it's very, very easy for the government to arrest people who send the message, especially when it's a mass message, to many people. So this is one thing. And another one is that nobody really relevant to this acid attack was arrested, and also it was a very big gap, long period between this acid attack and when the people were aware of. And as we heard from this victim, they were told and actually ordered by the police not to talk about that and not to interview with the media.
Nazreen, just hold on tight for a moment. This is from ISNA, it's the Iranian Student News Agency. If you have a look on my laptop here, we just got this in just before the program. So a member of the National Security Council in Parliament says that the acid attacks in Isfahan were done by one person, and that person will soon be arrested. And he also added that Isfahan has returned to normal and that in the past 10 days they've had no further attacks. Let me head back to Malika, and then Suzanne, I haven't forgotten that you wanted to add something as well, but Malika.
Right, well, I will actually direct this to you, Suzanne. This is a Facebook comment from Kibo, and he says, when an established power feels the need to encourage citizens to participate in moral policing, it means that they're insecure and feel that they're losing control. So this is in reference to the idea online that people say this is hardliners who are pushing people to act in this way. What do you make of that?
I do think it is. I do think that it's hardliners that are really promoting, they're using the platforms available to them to promote a discourse, often calling for actions of violence against women. But I also think that the foundation for this is much broader than just this. I mean, we really have to address violence against women from a systematic level, looking at laws, looking at the platforms that people have in their control, looking at this morals and vice sort of legislation that allows people to stop you on the street as a woman and tell you what you need to wear. But I also want to say that this is not a personal attack. It's a societal attack. It's an attack against the society, and it's an attack that makes all women insecure. And I think it needs to be dealt with very seriously. We've had two different levels of dealing with this issue. One has been a lot of conservatives who've come forward and said, that attributed the attacks to plots by foreign agents or dismissed it as one individual, that it's not a systematic thing. But talking to my contacts in Isfahan, I've actually gotten a very different picture of how the local authorities have been dealing with this. And although they've been slow to catch whoever the culprit or culprits are, they seem to have done a very good job in being very systematic and thorough. And this is from activists on the ground, women activists, people who organize the protests. They're calling in, I'm not sure if necessarily, they're calling in anybody who's ever had they've been suspicious of acts of violence against women. They're questioning them. The fact that it's taking a long time actually to some degree is reassuring, and hopefully they'll find it, because they're not dealing with it just as a political case to say, oh, somebody did it and here is the person.
So Suzanne, you think a genuine investigation is underway?
I think a genuine investigation is underway, and I think it's important to sort of acknowledge that and say, and I also want to say that they're doing other things. They're out in the community, sort of going up into cars with motorcycles, telling women to pull down their windows, and when women pull down their windows, they're telling them that they shouldn't do it. So there's this public effort to educate.
All right, pull down the windows.
So
you shouldn't do that.
They're telling women how they should be careful.
All right.
So I think it's important.
Interesting. Nagar, final word from your Iranian community is what?
So there has also been this response about the sort of the amount of time that it's taking for the arrest. People have taken to some sort of sarcasm, I would say, in the online community, mentioning the kids on the happy video who were arrested immediately, or people who've been sending messages through Viber, like jokes and stuff about Iranian officials who've been arrested. So I see a little bit of criticism in the community about the time that it's taking. But I also wanted to read this comment from Khudnevis, this tweet actually. He says, they say the acid attacks has been exaggerated. Well, if this media coverage didn't exist, there would be far more victims by now. This is important because a lot of people see this as something that was done as a pilot, as a test, and if there hasn't been so much public and media and even official backlash, it could have continued either in Isfahan or maybe even in other major cities. And of course, that line of thought is that there's obviously somebody bigger behind this than them being random. Definitely, you see that sentiment online a lot. All right, very interesting. Let me leave you with something that actually is a little bit more heartwarming from the end of this conversation. Have a look here on my laptop. This is another campaign that's been running, and this is motorcyclists around Iran actually going up to women and giving them roses, actually pushing back on the idea that women will be attacked in the streets of Isfahan. Okay. Much more in this conversation in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. We're taking all of our guests there. Let me tell you about the next AJ stream. We are looking at digital addiction. Is social media keeping us from socializing in the real world? I'm feeling a little bit nervous about that one. I will disengage from my laptop and hopefully see you on that show next time. Thanks for watching.
This is the Stream's online post show. We've been talking about a recent string of acid attacks against Iranian women in the city of Isfahan and how Iranians are responding. Often when Malika and I, we're working out how to have a conversation with our guests, as I have a favourite subject that I don't like to put in because it goes in every subject, which is what?
The media.
The media. The media is in every single subject. The media in this topic, though, is incredibly important. So I will talk about it. Well, Nagar will talk about it. All right, Nagar. Trying to get this story out from within Iran. What happened?
So the most important thing I would say happened was that the photographer from ISNA news agency, which you pulled up, and also 3 other journalists were arrested after they covered the protests against the acid attacks. This is a state, semi-state sponsored news agency, and the fact that it wasn't tolerated for the protests against acid attacks and these journalists were arrested, that was also a very important sign that the community had been talking about. I wanted to pull up this cartoon.
What's the sign then? Because obviously they know how to report in Iran, they know where the lines are. So what is that saying then?
That the red line maybe in this case had changed. Maybe things didn't go as they were planned. Maybe there wasn't so much expectation for this much backlash that came from the public and even within the structures of power. And I think this cartoon sums it up pretty interestingly. It's called The Suspects, and what you see in the cartoon is in the middle is the woman who's the symbol of the person who's been attacked by the acid, and then you see 4 journalists, and these are seen as the suspects, and then you see a person in the background who's holding the acid, and it's been almost a month and nobody has been arrested. So who is supporting or sponsoring or leading these people who've done the attacks? That hasn't been found yet.
Well, it's interesting. You asked those questions, and what I'm seeing online is people saying we're not getting those answers in the media. There's a lack of transparency. So, Sadek, I know this is something that you personally have thoughts on. I'd like you to listen to this video comment from someone who says there needs to be more transparency.
Main reason which made acid attacks this much politicized was the lack of transparency among the officials. At first, our officials denied any even existence of these attacks, and after a while, which they admitted the existence, they actually blamed it on foreign powers, and people didn't believe them because they, of course, were lying at first.
So Sadek, he says the message from officials was confusing and there's a lack of transparency. Would you agree with that? Do you think that the media is doing a good job of relaying what officials are saying? Sadek?
I mean, I would agree that there's lack of transparency, there's lack of immediate action, they didn't move fast enough, there's a lot of mixed messages coming, especially from national people, so I think it creates a lot of distrust and distance between the public and officials. And lastly, I want to also say that, this is not, you talked about a campaign that's happening. There's another campaign that's happening. It's a white ribbon campaign that women's activists are starting. And it addresses the key causes. It addresses broadly violence against women. And it's calling upon people to really condemn this broad violence against women, but also acid attacks. So I think, you see some good reactions coming out of this.
Sure. Professor Sadek, what did you want to add? Sadek, what did you want to add?
If I got your comments properly, I think we must be very careful as to how much do we involve some Iranian officials in this attack. I want to rule out, not because of out of sympathy for the Iranian government, but also out of the fact that at the moment there is a huge campaign, a political campaign against the Islamic State.
Okay, so just as we're about to hear about the huge campaign, we lost Professor Sadek. We will get him back, hopefully before the end of this show. I want to show you something in the meantime on my laptop here. My Stealthy Freedom, and it's women who are taking off their hijab, taking off their covering as a way of resistance, pushing back against the very tight controls in terms of dress that they have in Iran. It's sometimes known as forced hijab, Suzanne. Can you explain how moving back maybe your hair a little bit, showing your hair a little bit, is a form of resistance?
Well, I mean, I think that there are a lot of laws that sort of limit women, including forced, the mandatory hijab. But I think that Iranian women have resisted consistently against all the discrimination against them. So whether it's, sort of pushing the limits on hijab, which is, it's sort of not always an organized sort of movement, or if it's an organized movement where you're going out into the streets and talking to the public and, talking about discrimination or talking about acid attacks and violence. I mean, I think that there's a lot of resistance, and women are shaping their public sphere despite all the backlash. So,
Malika.
Well, Nigar, on the back of what Suzanne just said, Free Democratic Iran, which is the name of this Twitter handle, says state violence, whether it's execution by hanging or promotion of virtue and prevention of vice, which was the aim of this proposed law, aims at intimidating civil society. So all these are methods, this person is saying, of trying to squash civil society.
I agree, and along those same lines as what you were saying about the stealthy frame, I have a comment that actually directly responds to that. It's from this young woman in Canada who also didn't want to be mentioned for very specific reasons. She says, in recent years, women's hijab in Iran has become more about fashion than Islamic identity, and women speak out against hijab in such ways as, for example, the Facebook page, My Stealthy Freedoms, and this has caused anger and anxiety within the clerical regime, leading to Friday prayer leaders encouraging more aggressive reaction to bad hijab, and then that encouragement becomes a lead for certain vice groups who, as people are suspecting, who would go out and actually execute these kind of behaviors.
Sure. We have got Professor Sadegh back. It's great to have you back. Professor, you said that you were quite surprised that we would call you up to talk about this subject. Now that we have, where do you think we're going to go with this story? Are we done with the acid attacks, do you think?
Yes, I think for the most part we are, because as I said, the Islamic government became internationally very embarrassed because there were people who were trying to draw lines as to behavior of Daesh in Iraq, in Syria, with what has happened in Isfahan. And on the one hand, Islamic government is trying to suppress Daesh. On the other hand, you find some Iranians who support the Islamic regime and act very much in the same way as Daesh does. So these were all very embarrassing for Tehran, for the government in Iran. And I think the government would do its best to prevent this kind of behavior, because they realize that it is so damaging to the international and
all right, just finishing up there, just as we're losing that Skype contact with Professor Sadegh. And Malika, last word.
Well, I will read this from Nima, because this is a tweet that we got from Iran, and I know it takes a lot of effort to be able to tweet from Iran.
Initiative.
Strategy, exactly. So Nima writes in, big protests were held in Isfahan and Tehran. Many protesters arrested, but the attacker remains free. So it just speaks to the amount of calls online that people want to make sure that whoever's responsible is put to justice.
Sure. So I have to say thank you to Nigar, Nazreen, Suzanne and Sadegh for being part of this conversation. And we tell you about the next AJ stream. We're going to be talking about digital addiction. Are you addicted, Malika Bilal?
I am. And it's not even a secret. I clearly am addicted.
What's the first thing you do in the morning?
I check my phone.
Oh, okay. Nigar, are you addicted?
Same addiction.
First thing you do in the morning?
I check my phone. Twitter.
Last thing you do?
I tweet.
Oh, we're in so much trouble. Look. If I close my lid of my laptop, I'd be like this. All right. Okay, we're all addicts. You can come be an addict with us on the next AJ stream when we talk about digital addiction. Until then, I'll see you online.